Welcome to this episode of Stageworthy. I'm Phil Rickaby, the host and producer of this podcast. Stageworthy is Canada's theatre podcast, and on Stageworthy, I talk to theatre makers of all kinds, from actors to directors to playwrights, producers, directors, stage managers. If they make theatre in Canada, I talk to them. Some of the people I talk to are household names, and the rest are people that I really think you should get to know. If you're watching on YouTube, please like this episode, leave a comment so that I know that you were here. And if you like Stageworthy, hit the subscribe button and that bell icon so that whenever a new episode comes out, you'll get notified that a new episode is available. If you're listening to the audio version, make sure that you're subscribed there. Go to your favorite podcast app, search for Stageworthy, and hit the follow button. That way, whenever a new episode comes out, it will download directly to your device. You won't have to do anything. And while you're there, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please consider leaving a rating and a review. Your ratings and reviews help new people to find the show, and I would be really grateful if you could do that. Speaking of gratitude, I have a Patreon, and I am so grateful to the people who are backing me on Patreon. I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end of the show before I tell you about who next week's guest is. But just know that the people who are backing me on Patreon, they're helping me to make this show. And so I'm super grateful to them. So if you're interested in that, go to patreon.com/stageworthy and become a patron. There's another way to support if you would like to do so. If you're not able to commit to an ongoing donation, but would like to, leave some kind of tip or donation, there's a new link in the show notes that would allow you to do that. But let's get into it, because I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later on. But let's get into this week's episode. This week, I am talking to Sharry Flett. Sharry is a veteran of 34 years at the Shaw Festival. This year, she's playing Rat in Wind in the Willows, among other things. And we have a great conversation coming up about Wind in the Willows, about being a veteran at a festival and what that means, and also the importance of teaching. There's just so much in this episode. I can't wait for you to hear it. So let's get to it. This is my conversation with Sharry Flett. Sharry Flett, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate this. You are at the Shaw Festival.
Mm-hmm.
I believe you've been there for 34 seasons.
34 seasons, yes.
I
arrived in 1988, so there's been some seasons in between, but essentially that's the number of seasons.
Yeah, you've been there through 3 artistic directors, which is a fascinating experience to see what each artistic director brings to the table. I definitely want to get into that, but I know you are also starring in Wind in the Willows at the Shaw Festival, which I think not only is it a wonderful book and series of books, that series is so beloved. I remember having that read to me as a child. I saw a production of it at Young People's Theater many years ago over the holidays. So it's a wonderful story. What was your relationship to the Wind in the Willows like before coming to this play?
For me, it was my husband was actually in Toad of Toad Hall in 1980 at Canadian Stage, and he played Chief Weasel. As a Christmas gift, I gave him the book of Kenneth Grahame's book. And it was a new publication, so it sat in our library for a very long time. And then with Wind in the Willows this year, I pulled it out and started to read it. Became enchanted by it. So I knew of Wind in the Willows through Toad of Toad Hall by A.A. Milne, and so to come to the book and to then read a little bit about Kenneth Grahame's life and his son, that he would write these chapters and read them aloud to his son, Alistair. So they were chapter by chapter, and each story would be a new story of the time by which he'd finished writing the chapter. So in reading through this book, before we started rehearsals, I became absolutely enchanted by the life, by the writing, by the fact that he didn't apologize to his child for using big words. And And what Fiona Sauder has done with Bad Hats production Magnifico, but as in adapting this from page to stage and adapting it through Toad of Toad Hall, she has not backed down from those big words as well. And children, we watch the audience become involved both for all ages, and they are enchanted. They love the rhythm of the storytelling, and they love Bad Toad, and they listen to the words. So I think this is just brilliant of what Kenneth Grahame has done in writing big words in these stories as well.
I think kids appreciate when you don't talk down to them. If you are brave enough to use those big words, they'll work them out.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You mentioned that production of Toad of Toad Hall, because I said what young people's theater, but given that year, I think that was the production I saw.
Oh, and then you must have been a child.
I was about 14 at the time.
Oh, isn't that wonderful that you were introduced that way? That's lovely.
Yeah, no, it's fabulous. Now, you mentioned Fiona. I talked to Fiona a while back, and I also know that André Morin is the assistant director, and you taught both of them at George Brown College.
Well, all three. So when I arrived, I was a part of coming into their third year for about 3 weeks, just prior to Christmas. And we did what was called Theatre Ontario and then became Next Generation Showcase. So we would coach and prepare these final year students for introducing themselves to the profession. So all of the casting agents, artistic directors would come live to a particular theater, and each of the schools would present themselves as a class, and each student would then present themselves doing a contemporary and a classical audition piece. So I was working with a contemporary of Fiona Sauder and Jack Davidson Rennie, who is the fight director for us and the movement director, and then André Morin, who was assisting. They all knew each other at George Brown. There were years between, but I coached all three of them. So if you can imagine walking into that room 10 years later in life, and there they are, established young artists themselves, and I am being directed and suggested by them and coached by them. And so it was full circle. So for me and for them, there was a pathway that we had to go through to get to the other side of, yes, I'm the actor being directed and you are in leadership. And they were all wonderful.
That is a fascinating two sides of the coin.
Oh, yeah.
As somebody who does teach quite a bit, I'm sure this is not your first time working with somebody that you've taught. Is there a process that you've been able to come up with of trying to change in your mind between being the teacher and just being an actor? Is that a difficult?
No, because you meet them as individuals, personalities who are arriving in the company, also as fellow actors, and you're embracing their first time into the company and helping them along. This was a different type of experience because I had to mentally let go of that history and remembering each of them in that coaching position and allow myself to become vulnerable and to be directed by them. It was a very interesting experience, but eventually we quickly got to the other side of it all.
I mean, you kind of have to. I mean, being in a festival setting does give you a little bit more room to breathe, but not a lot. You still have to buckle down and get to work. So you must have to get to that point as quickly as possible.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And, with this production, Wind in the Willows, it's so multidisciplinary, and you're also rehearsing in a repertory situation. So we would have maybe 3 or 4 hours. Then there'd be a few days in between seeing each other again. We had time, but not a lot of time. So in total, you were putting all of these disciplines together. And then the Fiona Sauder Bad Hats personality is tempo, speed, rigorous. It's very specific, so it's meticulous in its direction and articulation of that. So it was a really very interesting process.
That Hat's work and Fiona's work tends to be multidisciplinary. So it doesn't surprise me that carries over to this production. But Fiona's work also really works around ensemble and collaboration. How has that shaped the rehearsal process and even going into performances for Wind in the Willows?
Well, we are very much, the Shaw Festival really honors and enjoys itself to be an ensemble company. So we're already functioning as as team players. And that's a particular part of the joy of being here is that team playing. So we already had established that. They were newcomers to the Shaw Festival, learning all kinds of things. André Morin has been an actor here for quite a few years. Fiona has been here as an assistant director for one season, but coming into this process was new for them. And Jeff Newbury, who is the original creator of sound and music, also was new to the process here. And it's exciting for them. It was different for them. But I think we were able to help along the way as far as we are already an ensemble. So let's get to work. And that's been, it was fun.
As a veteran member of the company, is there something that you would want somebody new coming into the company to know? What does somebody who's new need to know about the Shaw Festival?
I think just being assured that there's an aspect of being able to learn. You're introduced to a large number of people all at once, and it's fearful for them, I think, at the beginning. But also there is a slow introduction. There's a period of time where they can come for, I think, about a week to 2 weeks before we actually start the season. And they experience various people in the company, and they work on things that are a part of expectations here. So it gives them an introduction. I think it's just helping them to feel less fearful.
Yeah. I mean,
because we're all vulnerable.
Of course, especially when you come into, if you're new in an established company, that's pretty nerve-wracking. So it's good that the Shaw Festival has that. The Wind in the Willows is largely a children's play, and I'm sure that there are plenty of adults who come to see it, who grew up with the book, who've had experiences with it, and they're coming for that nostalgia, and they're coming to experience that, and they're probably also coming to share that with their children. But how important is children's theater in terms of like the next generation of theater goers?
It's absolutely vital to theater today, especially. And there have been shifts at the Shaw Festival. There were times where Peter Pan was done through Christopher's time and Alice in Wonderland through Jackie's time. But since Tim Carroll has arrived, he's really attempted to bring and invite and escalate the whole experience of children being in the theater, and even more so in the last couple of seasons, to really feel for everyone that this is their place to come to. And children are especially invited to feel that this is your place. This is what you are invited to be experiencing. And yes, those audiences with Wind in the Willows, it's delightful because you see the grandparents, but they have come by themselves. And they are laughing as well as the parents, as well as people who are just coming to see Wind in the Willows, as well as the children. So it's this multi-generational group in the audience, and it's a lovely intimate theater in the third stage that we have, or the Jack and Maxwell studio. So it's such an intimate surrounding, and so we are all having a lot of fun. And the more bad Toad is, the better it is.
It is certainly performing for children is a different experience than performing for a room full of adults. What is an audience of children? How is it different than an audience of adults?
I'm not so sure that it's any different. You don't lie to children. You don't talk down to children. You don't, I'm trying to find the right word for it. You treat them as equals and you tell the story equally, and they will come to you. So to me, if anything, it might be rhythm. It might be a faster rhythm that nurtures them, that seduces them, that titillates them.
Yeah.
Their minds are so fast.
Very fast. I remember years ago when I was at George Brown College and we did our Christmas production, which was a children's show. One of the first things they told us was the children will know if you're lying to them. And if you are not completely committed to this, they're going to get bored and they'll talk amongst themselves. They will not stand any bullshit.
No, they can see it so quickly. And I sometimes wonder how we lost that. I think most of the time we as human beings know, but children are just so pure, and they just completely understand. Doing children's theater in that second year at George Brown Theater School, it's one of the best exercises to do.
It is such an exercise in not only being completely committed and truthful, but also holding an audience's attention. If you can hold that room of children, that will serve you when you're playing to adults too.
Yes, I think so.
It's such a great experience. So you were playing Rat in The Wind in the Willows. How do you approach the character of Rat?
I think the book influenced me the most. I just kept reading the book. And then I read this lovely description of Rat by I think it was someone who knew Graham, because he felt that Rat was closest to Graham, the writer. And he said that he's prone to bursts, prone to becoming emotional, loves poetry, but also is meticulous in discipline and hardworking, and also Graham just loved to be in boats. And this is what Rat loves to do. He loved to be by the river. So the more that I just read about that description, the more engaged I became with Rat.
Is there something in particular that you love most about performing this show?
I think it's the collective ensemble fun. We are allowed, now that we've pulled all of the disciplines together, and now that our rhythm is the rhythm that it needs to be, we also, you suddenly feel, okay, I can sit in the pocket. So you stand waiting for the beginning, and Fiona Sauder created, and also our movement person, Jack, created this wonderful beginning where there is a child and a nurse, and the nurse is running after the child, but she can see what the nurse cannot see, and that's all of us. So we enter into the scene and wave at the child, and the child waves back, but the nurse doesn't see it. And so begins the play. And so we go, it's just a lot of fun to be a part of that.
You mentioned Jack, you mentioned the movement director, and this is a particular challenge in a play like this when the cast are all playing animals, but still people. They're animals that are wearing jackets and suits and all of the same things. What kind of work went into creating the physicality for all of the creatures in the show?
It was a slower process because there was a lot of other things to do in terms of the fight and the movement and just moving from one scene into the other, transitions. So there was a gradual independent exploration of what our animals were. And so I find now that a few weeks into running this show, more animal characteristics are emerging from each of us. And so it's finding the combination between the people and the animal that lives inside of those characters. And that's been a lot of fun. And so I'm seeing Lawrence Libor as Toad. He's wonderful. He used to be a drummer, and he apparently had a band when he was in England, came to Canada. So he's a dancer, he's a singer, he's played drums. So he has this internal Carrie madness about him. And out of it is coming physical life that is completely Toad, but a crazy human being with enormous internal energy that's just busting out at all of his seams. And at the same time, I see a Toad now. So he's absolutely delicious as bad Toad. We're all trying to keep him in line.
I find it fascinating. You mentioned Bad Toad a couple of times, and you mentioned that the kids really like Bad Toad. What is it about Bad Toad that you think the kids really respond to?
I remember one child towards the beginning of our show, because at one point in the judgment scene, the children are reached out to and asked the opinion of, what do you think of Toad, and should he go to jail? And the very first little person who said, what do you think of Toad? Toad is very naughty. And so that's what it is. It's the naughtiness of Toad. Toad's breaking the rules, and yet he doesn't mean to. It's just his effervescent love of life and curiosity, and he's on to one thing and then another and another and another. And you can't keep him down. And the children just love that. So the naughtier he is, the better.
Well, I mean, there's a certain liberation in watching someone be naughty when sometimes children aren't allowed to be a little.
Exactly.
There's a lot of glee to that.
Fun of breaking the rules and being yourself.
Yes. Yeah.
Being yourself.
In your mind, is there really much difference between performing in a quote unquote kid show and performing in a show for grown-ups?
It's been a very long time. We used to, I don't know if you remember this yourself, but we used to pack up the vans and move on. This was at the very beginning. This was many decades ago that I remember packing the van and moving on to the next school. And thinking to myself, I don't think I want to do this anymore in terms of children's theater. And now doing this, because it's been a long time since I've done something like this, it is the greatest joy to do it. And to me, there's not a dividing line between just doing a play and doing Wind in the Willows.
Yeah. I mean, I sometimes wish that adults could approach theater with the kind of energy that kids bring to a show. You know, sometimes it can be an overwhelming wall of energy that comes from kids that are truly excited to be at a play. Years ago, I did a show that was around a beloved children's television character, and we would walk out on stage, and the wall of energy that would come at us, you don't get that from other audiences.
Because they were so familiar with what they were expecting to see. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, no, and that's delicious. And we find our audiences have more of a wonder, because how familiar are you with Toad Hall or Wind in the Willows? I think for a lot of the children's audience, they are discovering. And so there's a sense of wonder. And then they become mesmerized because they are so intent on listening. And when things go wrong or when Toad is naughty, then you hear them erupt. But the story is unexpected for them. So they all go away cheering after they've experienced the show. But it's such a sense of wonder for them. And I love that.
It's so fascinating and such an honor, I think, to be part of a child's first experience in the theater. And I think that wonder is a huge part of it. How does this happen? Who are these people? What are they like? I remember seeing a show years ago with a 4-year-old, and it was a children's show. And after the show, they kind of wondered, like, will those people come out and they'll be the same people? Like, where do they go now? And they were like fascinated both by what they saw on stage and then what happens after. It's so fascinating to watch a child wrap their mind around theater.
Absolutely. Yes. And a child, as you meet them, not as whatever character you were, and you look at them eye to eye, their eyes look at you as if they're trying to understand the connection. Absolutely, you're right. But they also have this sense of, I believed so much in the character I saw, and there you are, and you were that character. So it's fascinating for them, and I think that's all a part of the joy of introducing theater to them as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the best part is if they have fun, they'll ask to do it again another year.
But also, it's that experience of coming together. I think that it's the whole idea of what theater is, and bless theater, because I think it will remain alive. And there's always been that question of what will happen to theater. But as children coming into a space and a collective space, and it's all live sounds, live people, it's so deeply important for them. And you can feel that experience is quite special, and they want more of it.
Yeah. I really think, as we talk, as the world keeps wrestling with AI and what that means and what it's going to do to entertainment industries, I do think that there's an opportunity for theater because it's the one medium where you can't fake it with AI. Yes. It is always live. It's always real people on the stage. It's always us and the audience together. And I do think that people will grow hungrier for that reality.
I agree. And I think it's just a matter of them being there in the seat and experiencing it live, and one thing leads to another.
Yeah, absolutely. I think exposure to theater is the best advertisement for theater. It's just sometimes hard to get everybody into that seat sometimes, but it is the best way forward. I want to ask you a little bit about your time at Shaw, because you mentioned there were some breaks in there in your 34 years at the Shaw Festival, but 34 years is a long time to be at one festival. Is there anything in particular that made you want to stay at the Shaw Festival?
I've had more decades of work before I came to the Shaw Festival as well. So when I arrived, I was introduced to Christopher Newton. I certainly knew very much about him and his work. I had some seasons at Stratford. So by the time I arrived at Shaw, I was also introduced to Bernard Shaw. I certainly knew of him as a writer, but not as someone acting in a play by Bernard Shaw. And I became enthralled by this writer and enthralled by his politics, his social standing, and to realize that time has not changed. So he became a very contemporary writer for me. And I think the way in which Christopher Newton, by this time, directed Shaw was very exciting as well. Also, I was invited into an ensemble. I was invited into a team playing, which has always continued, whether it was Jackie Maxwell or Tim Carroll's time, that sense of ensemble. And I think some of Bernard Shaw's philosophy, which Christopher Newton really honored at the very beginning of Christopher's time, he was not an advocate of Shaw. He was what's the word for it? He was a slight adversary to Shaw, but he was seduced by Bernard Shaw. And he became one of the finest directors of Bernard Shaw because he understood it. And he understood who Shaw was. He understood the times. He understood the history, the philosophy. So to me, some of his productions were so exciting. And it was great to be a part of all of that. So I found it seductive to stay. And of course, I went away. But then, and I had our child, Michaela, a beautiful, wonderful young woman now. And he wanted me to come back. And then he also asked for my husband, Anthony, to come to Shaw. So we arrived as a family with a 6-month-old. And life continued. So you're only as good as your season. Once the season's over, you may be hired again, you may not be hired again. So one season led to another season, to another season, to another season. And we remained as a family. And in fact, our daughter, Michaela, ended up in 2 productions under Jackie Maxwell's artistic directorship. So life became such an interesting community with Shaw, and living in a small town. I would then finish the season and go off and do some teaching somewhere, and then we would be invited back. So suddenly, 34 seasons later, you're going, how did that all happen? How did I end up being at the Shaw Festival for 34 seasons? That's a big question, and it's gone so fast.
That question of at the end of the season, will I be asked back next year? As early in a career, that must be relatively nerve-wracking, especially if you've put down roots in a place like Niagara-on-the-Lake. How did you deal with that uncertainty?
I think for me, I arrived understanding all of that. I think when you are just coming out of school, when you're just beginning to find your feet and desperately you're impassioned with wanting to be an actor, a good actor. This place offers a lot of different angles to improving your craft, to meeting good directors, extremely good designers of all sorts, wonderful musicians. So it's a palette of enticement, especially for the young person. We had to be very philosophical about it. And there were times where I was at Shaw and my husband was not. And you recognize the actor's a nomadic breed as it is. You end up becoming a nomad, though you don't want to be a nomadic. And sometimes you're putting children into a car and driving off to some other city. It's there's an oddity to all of that, and yet when you are young and just entering into the business, it's sometimes extremely good to leave the Shaw Festival and go off and do exactly that. and see what life is on the other side.
There's certainly an excitement to the early years of the acting career of traveling around and moving from place to place to fulfill each contract. I know for me, as I get older, that is far less attractive as time goes
Absolutely.
on.
Absolutely.
I would much rather do good work in one place than be chasing good work in many places.
Yeah. Yes. And I think we all naturally come to that understanding.
I think so too. No, we mentioned that you've seen the festival under three different leaderships: Christopher Newton, Jackie Maxwell, and now Tim Carroll. It's clear that the ensemble feeling and the ensemble ethos has been a part of that throughout.
Hey.
Are there differences that you, as an actor in the company, that you've felt as leadership changes, or does it largely remain, we are an ensemble and everything else? Those concerns of the changes don't really affect you?
I think the changes that are happening now are quite defined under Tim Carroll's artistic direction and Tim Jennings. And also what is happening is we are having changes in venues. So the George Theatre, which is the smaller theatre on the main street, is now a hole in the ground. So there is a whole new concept and idea and a building that in 3-ish years plus, perhaps, will be there inviting the public to become more a part of the interior of what goes on in the theater. And I think they're trying to cross those borders between that fourth wall, what they call the fourth wall. If you come into the theater, you sit in the space and you watch what's going on stage. But there's an invitation to cross that border more and more, I think. And I think that theater is happening globally as well. It's also the artists in residence is not just for young artists, but for all ages, for finding the artist inside of yourself. So a lot of programming may start to change quite a bit. I'm not quite sure where that goes outside of, you have good theater in the theaters, and then also there is a whole new building called Artists in Residence, the Burton Center for Learning, which is inviting people of all ages to enter into what is this, what is the art, and what is art forms, and seeing what the artist is inside of you.
Yeah. I think that you were mentioning that crossing of the fourth wall, the bringing people in. I think that's one of the ways forward for theater, because what we do is kind of like magic to people who don't do it. They always have so many questions. How do you learn all those words? How do you get changed so quickly? What is they all have questions about how it works. And just like back when I was growing up, they used to have behind the scenes specials on like the latest movie, and so you could see like how the special effects were done. I think people are fascinated by how it's made.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They want to know, and especially, don't you find people when there's puppets or magic, that there's such a wonder and curiosity as to how all of that works? I went to see Heartbreak House, which is at the Jackie Maxwell Theatre by George Bernard Shaw, Heartbreak House. I loved that play. It was directed by Tim Carroll, and I had 2 opportunities to see it. And what he did with it, and what the actors were doing with it, made me sit there in wonder. And I thought to myself, how do they do that? I would really like to do it that way, I said to myself. How are they doing that? And so I had the same question sitting there. And I love the production of Heartbreak House. I think it's just beautiful.
When magic happens, we all want to feel how it's done, right? That kind of, it's like not just the magic trick, but like the magic trick you mentioned, puppets. The way that a child can see the puppet being operated and completely ignore the person operating it because the puppet is the only thing that's real, which is like one of those fascinating things that the child's brain can do. And it's one of my favorite things. I would love to talk about you a bit more specifically. Is it true that you almost went into medicine?
Yes. I mean, it was an expectation just because medicine was in the family. I just assumed that that's what would happen to me. And so I was moving in that direction. But I have to say, I was in high school and I was forced into taking music. And I thought it came from the public school, the elementary school teacher who saw something in me, and she disallowed whatever option I was going to take. And when I got to high school, I found I was put into music, and I thought, well, I didn't ask for this. And then I picked up a flute. We had to each choose our instrument. I don't know if you remember this. Chose the instrument. I picked up the flute, and this electricity went through my arm. And I thought, even before I played it, I said, this is what I want to do. This is it. I want music. I want the arts. And my brain just aligned with that for the rest of the time.
How did that connection with music lead you to theater?
I think because music went to voice, and I was singing and also thinking towards the classics. I went to McGill and have 2 degrees in music there, was moving towards opera, and as a result, also just experimentation. When I was at McGill, I was trying everything. And so it was in that and discovering theater and music, and also opera is so aligned to theater as well, that when I was auditioning in Europe for opera schools and teachers, my last audition was at a theater school that morning that I'd managed to get, and I had done this audition tour. And that's the thing too, is that there were no theater schools. There were no schools in Canada to really rely on. So you were, in a way, enticed to go off to England, which I did, or to New York to study. And it was that final day of my final audition tour, that final day, that I suddenly thought, I want to go to theater school. I want to find theater through music, not music through theater, or music through theater, not theater through music. So it reversed itself.
What was your first experience to theater? Do you remember when you first saw a play and or what was that first thing that you saw?
I actually think it was somewhere in the 60s, and I think it was Richard Burton in Camelot in Toronto. That suddenly I just thought, oh, what is this? And I became fascinated by it, and also going to Stratford in high school.
Oh, I was asking about your connection to the classics, actually. I think there's a thing that happens now, because we do a lot of studying of Shakespeare when we are in high school. And I still think we teach it badly.
Oh, badly.
And yeah, we teach it in such a way that the kids are not connecting to it at all. And then we take them to see a show and they behave poorly. What was your connection to the classics like because you mentioned going to the Stratford Festival when you were in high school? Did you connect with it then, or did that come later?
Again, it was being in that space, that beautiful theater. And if, as a young person, you've never experienced a space like that, it's extraordinary. So you're drawn into the experience from the space onto this extraordinary stage at the Festival Theatre. And then you start to hear the play, and you hear it as if you've never heard it before. And everything that was in a book, in a classroom, where you were closing off your attention span after 2 pages, was a complete difference of experience. So I don't know what needs to be done, but it's certainly, people need to understand the aspect of the play in the first place as a teacher. What comes alive, and there are only a very few teachers that are capable of bringing that page off the page on into the space, into the room, into those children's minds and hearts. Very few people can do it. So I think it does need that experience of going to the space and experiencing the play.
I agree. I think I've said for a while, because I remember when I was in high school, they made us read it out loud in class, and that's how we studied it. And we wouldn't even read whole sections. It was you read this bit, and the person behind you will read the next. And so there was no consistency. And it was and we didn't know what those words meant, because the words weren't spoken by somebody who understands the language.
Exactly.
And when the words are spoken by somebody who understands it, the audience understands it. And
yes,
I've said for years now that we're doing it wrong. We should expose the kids to the performance and then have them study it, rather than have them study it and then maybe take them to a performance later on.
I think the teacher that's impassioned with arts will do that. But otherwise, even someone who is literary may not really be able to bring the imagination to the experience of the play. What exists between people as they're trying to communicate with each other. It's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
How you bring that young person to become impassioned about the word on the page, or impassioned about thought, and being able to gather words to put together into thoughts, and the deliciousness of debate, or the deliciousness of conversation, and finding language, finding the passion within your own language, whatever it may be.
Absolutely. You mentioned impassioned teachers, and you are a teacher. You mentioned in the off season of Shaw going off to teach at various schools. You've taught at George Brown College, the National Theatre School, Queen's, U of T, Brock, other places. What is it that draws you to teaching?
Exciting their curiosity, seeing what happens when they bring the words off the page. Again, it's oftentimes we would work with Bernard Shaw, with the student, but we would also work around it. Guy Bannerman and I were team teachers for quite a number of years with Queen's University coming to Shaw Festival. They do a 2-week intensive, and they are actually coming this year. We have passed the course on to Graham Somerville and Marla McLean. And there are, in 2 weeks, the Queen's students can earn a full credit. So they do half a credit in the practicals in the morning and work with a professor in the afternoon. And they are examining the playwrights and the plays that are on within the season. But oftentimes in our practicals in the morning, we would be working with George Bernard Shaw. And it would be so exciting to start to see the light bulb drop and the the passion with which they would start to approach the argument. How do you win? And also, Shaw is very sexy. And the minute you try to help them to understand the sexiness of language and the sexiness of argument, they start to see it as well, and the light bulbs drop. And then I remember experiencing with U of T group who came, and they were working on Major Barbara, and there's a complex scene between cousins and Major Barbara at the very end of the play. They became so excited about this duet that they completely took it on their own. They read and read and reread the play until they understood it better. And then finally, by the time they got to the end of that play and that scene, they were able to completely invest in that final scene. And it was only because they became excited and curious and adventurous and understood. So it was so rejuvenating to watch these two people take this on.
Yeah, absolutely. That is very exciting. Was there something that initially, not everybody teaches, not everybody is drawn to it. What first made you want to start teaching?
I think curiosity, and I think it's the deliciousness of being invited into their youthful world. And if they trust you and there's mutual trust, then it's a mutual exchange. So I'm gaining as much from the experience as I'm attempting to exchange with them. So it becomes a time where you have a period of time, maybe 2 weeks. You come together, you meet personalities, different personalities. You understand how people communicate. It fulfills my curiosity and their curiosity, and hopefully there's a mutual exchange that happens, and they take away something, and I certainly take away something.
Amazing. Just drawing to a close, I want to return to Wind in the Willows for my last question, which is there something that has most surprised you about Wind in the Willows, whether it's something in rehearsal, something in performance, just something that you didn't expect?
To me, it's the eventual rhythm. It took us a long time as a group of people to pull together Fiona Sauder's idea of it, intention of it, discipline of it. And as we kept on working with all these multidisciplines and pulling them together into one, it took time to find the rhythm of this piece, which is much faster than one expects. And as we finally did pull that together, it's the joy, the absolute spontaneous joy of all of us as an ensemble leaping in and doing it and saying, all right, what's going to happen today? And we'll do it. And here we go. You don't have time to think. You can't think. You just do it. And out of it, you hear the audience. There's an exchange. The space is small. So it's a delight to really be there, run the gamut, and see what happens at the end of the 2 hours. And we have a great grand time.
That's amazing. That's wonderful. Well, Sharry, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you giving some time today.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed being here.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Stageworthy. I'll tell you about who my guest is next week in just 1 second. But first, please let me tell you about my Patreon, because I cannot make this show without the people who have chosen to back me on Patreon. It costs money to do this. A podcast is delivered to you for free, but it costs money to make it. And I don't have advertisers. I don't have sponsors. And so the only way that I can be compensated for anything about this show, about the making of this show, is through my Patreon backers, and also through the one-time donation like that you'll find in the comments if that's of interest to you. But it does cost money to make a show like this. And I actually would not be able to do this show without the people who've chosen to back me. And so I'm so grateful to them. They are the reason I can keep doing this, and they're the reason why I'm able to cover the costs. I will point out, though, that I still need your help if you are able to help out, because we're covering most of the costs of creating this show, but not all of them. And also none of my time is compensated. So if you would love to help me to make this show, I would love to have you on board. You can be one of the people that helps me make this show. I would be so grateful. And if, like I said before, if you can't commit or don't want to commit to an ongoing donation, you can leave a one-time tip at the coffee link that you'll find in the show notes. But I recently realized that the 500th episode is coming up, and I really want to try to set this podcast up for success for the next 500 episodes. So if you would like to help me do that, please go to patreon.com/stageworthy and become a patron, or go to the link in the show notes. If you can only do a one-time donation, I would be appreciative anyway, regardless of how you support me. I thank you so much for considering. Let's get into next week's episode. My guest next week is Madeline Rose, and Madeline has a show coming up at the Halifax Fringe Festival, and you're going to love hearing about that show. So tune in next week for that conversation with Madeline Rose on Stage.